So I got this shelf with the blue shelf from the last video. The guy was just getting rid of it, so he's like, oh, take this one too. And at first I was like, oh, this thing's hideous. But I actually adore the way that this one turned out. So I just stripped the top, and it was, you know, gross stripper, but I don't like sanding so much in my little shop, so sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. So yeah, stripping sludge, it's a thing, but I dealt with it. And then now I just have to do a light amount of sanding instead of as much as I would have had to do to get down to the bare wood, because I want to stain the top and then the little shelf inside. So this is an older piece, so I'm using this kind of stain prep so that it absorbs the stain evenly. I don't do this on all my pieces. It just seemed like a good idea for this one because it was just really old, really dried out, and I just wanted to make sure that it was going to go on well. And then since I'm doing my grays and creams and all that, I'm going with a gray stain. I got like 4 different stains from the store in these tiny little pots because I wasn't sure which one I would like best. When I do gray stain, I typically make my own with the vinegar and steel wool, but I didn't want to wait for that, so full stain it is. And I wasn't sure about the finish on this piece, so I just painted the doors purple, knowing that I was going to decoupage over them, and I ended up not doing anything that needed to have purple on it, but it still worked out. It still looks great. You can't see the purple through the decoupage paper, which actually turned out to my advantage, but initially it was going to have some purple hues to it. So here I'm busting off the front. I didn't want it to sit on the ground. I'm actually going to be making legs for this piece. If you guys don't follow the My DIY Wife, she came up with these legs, and then I kind of just did them my own way with, I didn't want to bust out my saws and stuff, so I just did it with my Japanese pull saw. But she is rock awesome, and they're super, super simple to do. She has an entire video on it, and like, that girl is mad genius. But they turned out awesome. You just do with a 1x3 board for your sides and front, and then with the 2x2s for the legs. I actually didn't need the 1x3 for the sides because the shelf still had these on here, so all I did was cut out the area that I needed for the 2x2 to fit in. And I just used my pull saw here. It's so flat that it was really easy to get it in really close to the wood, so it worked out really well. But so yeah, so I just needed the 1x3 across the front, and then the 2x2s sunk into the sides of the back and front of the shelf there. And yeah, it turned out great. I'm pretty happy with this. The front legs, I did the angle on as she does. The back legs I left alone. But here I just used a piece of wood to kind of make sure that they both have the same angle on them. And again, worked out well. It's much faster with an electric saw or a battery powered saw, but I didn't want to get mine out, and pull saws actually go pretty quick on smaller pieces of wood like these. And then I just went through and did the same gray stain on the added legs. So I'm sealing the top and everything with poly. I did this all in stages so that I could make sure I could be working on something else as another part was drying. So now that the stain was drying while I was doing the legs, and now I'm doing the poly on the top of the stain, and that way it'll be totally protected because I use chalk mountain paint, and that way if it gets on it at all, it'll just wipe off of the sealed surface. So it works out really, really well. So now that the poly's drying, I'm going back to the legs and attaching them. I'm just using pocket holes. They're just so easy and awesome, and they work really well, so that's what I did. Lucas is obviously helping me as per usual. And so now I'm taking some wax paper just to put over the top of my finished top to protect it, because when I'm doing decoupage, I'm just using it as a tabletop essentially. These kind of weird cabinet doors that this thing had holes throughout all of it, and I didn't want it to leak through onto anything else. So by putting the wax paper down, it's just adding a protective layer between these, and because I knew the poly was going to go through and get all over everything if I didn't. And it would also help make it easy to cut. Sorry, it will be an easy release once it's finished, because wax paper doesn't really stick to anything. I almost always have wax paper on hand in the shop because it's perfect for gluing things up and everything like that. So yeah, so I'm just sticking this on the normal way. You guys have seen me do this probably a million times by now, but I just use my poly, stick the tissue paper down or whatever medium I'm using to decoupage on with. Here I'm using a brayer because it has those weird holes throughout the entire front of it, and I want to make sure that I'm getting everything stuck down really well, so the brayer kind of helps with that. And then I'm just going over the top with more poly. And it's such thin paper. This is actually thicker than regular tissue paper. It's 18 pound, but it's still thin enough that the poly goes through from the bottom and also through from the top. So it kind of seals it in and makes it kind of one with the piece. And then of course the sanding block trick, whereas if you just take the sanding block all the way around the edges, it cleans off your edges and they turn out really, really smooth and nice, and you don't have to try and cut it to match anything or line anything up. It just goes on and comes off really nicely. Okay, so I did mix my own color because I wanted this to be gray and cream, not white. So I'm using mellow white, a little bit of light yellow, and some of the Woodland Harbor. So I mixed these up, just kind of eyeballing everything. I couldn't tell you the exact proportions. I just did it till I liked the color. And then I'm painting the entire piece with the exception, obviously, of the stained raw wood. But everything else on the piece is getting painted with this cream color. Now for the fun part, we are going to be doing the kind of aged stone, just kind of textured look with a bunch of different paint colors, and that just adds so much dimension and layers to your paint, to where when somebody looks at it, it just has so much more interest than a flat paint. So I started with the light yellow, and then I did the Woodland Harbor. We're even gonna add some blues in here, the indigo blue, a little bit of the purple. We're hitting it with everything. And as you know, this is kind of like a wash, so I'm making sure the paint is really, really, really thin. I just make sure that my brush is wet, and then I use the paint in the lid, and I make sure that I spray quite a bit of water in the lid so that it's even kind of drippy if you get too much. And then I use a wet rag, not a dry. You can use dry if you feel more comfortable with it. But I actually like using a wet rag to soak it up and kind of give it more texture. And this is going to look terrible until it doesn't. So you kind of just go with it, and then essentially you do wash over wash over wash until it's just this beautiful mottled cloudy finish, and it's just lovely. And if you're like a first time kind of, you want to get into blending but it's intimidating to you, this is a great way to do it, because I'm just doing color washes over the top of all the modeling effects, so it doesn't have to be a perfectly smooth blend, but it looks like a really, really smooth blend. And then here, after I've done all my washes and everything, I'm taking the side of a chip brush and I'm running it back and forth, and that's just kind of melting out the colors so they're not as harsh. You don't see any definitive lines, you don't see any of that. It just kind of softens it up and looks very, very soft focus. It gives it like a nice blurring effect, and it's just a really, really pretty look. So again, another wash with the lighter color on top, and then you can bring it back If you want to keep it darker, that's fine. You just kind of keep going until it's something that when you look at it, you feel happy. That's how I paint. If I look at it and I feel happy, then I feel like I'm doing my thing. I'm in the right zone. So I'm just knocking everything back here with just a light sanding block. And then I'm going to go in with the iron gate wash. And that's just to deepen up the bottom because I felt like I did a lot of really light colors at first. And so now I want the bottom to be deepened up. So you can see I'm going really, really soft with it at the top. And I go heavier with it at the bottom because again, we're keeping that blended look. So putting it on, wiping it back, and then we'll go in with the kind of mottled look once we're finished. But that's just going to sink into all the little texture parts that we have all over the entire piece from adding all those different colors. This might, I mean, it's a ton of steps, but it really doesn't take very long if you're concerned about that. There is a lot of steps just because you're going back and forth with all the colors, but it takes next to no time. And if you start on a small piece, then you got nothing to worry about. And then we're just sealing up with poly just to make everything uniform and nice and neat. Okay, so I felt like the top needed just a little bit of lightness added to it. So as you can see, I had the right side done, but on the left side I'm using white wax. So you spin it on with the brush, white wax it, and then you take it back with a rag. And then it just gives it just a softer look because I wanted to tone it down with the rest of the paint job. And then adding the cabinet doors, and this thing is finished. I can't tell you how much I love the way this turned out, which I really needed because I hated the blue shelf so much. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you like, subscribe, all that. And the next couple videos are going to be a little strange because I'm currently at my parents' house helping them remodel their kitchen. So it won't be money towards the house, but it is helping my parents out, which is really fun. So I've got a couple projects doing there, and so those will be the next few videos that you get. But thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate all the new subscribers. You guys are so awesome. Like, truly, truly appreciate you. And I'll see you guys next week.